The dystopian storm in the heart of a decaying city once known as prosperity, the sky had turned a sickly shade of grey. The air was thick with pollutants, and the sun was a distant memory, obscured by the perpetual clouds of industry and neglect. Prosperity, now a dystopian wasteland, was a place where hope had long been forgotten, buried under layers of despair and corruption. The city's inhabitants lived in constant fear of the storms that swept through with increasing frequency and ferocity. These were no ordinary storms but monstrous tempests born of the toxic air and the city's collective despair. They tore through the crumbling buildings, leaving destruction and chaos in their wake. The people called them Wrathstorms. Among the inhabitants of Prosperity was a young woman named Lyra. Her once bright eyes had dimmed, reflecting the hopelessness that pervaded the city. Yet, despite the bleakness, a spark of determination remained within her. She had seen too much suffering to simply give in. Her parents had died in a Wrathstorm when she was a child, and since then, she had vowed to find a way to protect those she loved. Lyra worked as a mechanic in one of the few remaining functional factories. The work was grueling, and the pay meager, but it provided her with the means to survive. More importantly, it allowed her access to the materials she needed for her secret project, a device she hoped could predict the Wrathstorms. Every night, after her shift ended, Lyra would return to her small, makeshift workshop. There, she pored over blueprints and tinkered with machinery, her hands greasy and her face smeared with grime. She was driven by a vision, a dream of a device that could offer a sliver of hope to the people of Prosperity. One particularly grim evening, as the winds howled outside and the factory workers huddled in their flimsy shelters, Lyra made a breakthrough. Her device, a crude but functional barometer enhanced with sensors she had scavenged from the factory, began to emit a faint, rhythmic beep. She had calibrated it to detect the specific atmospheric changes that preceded a Wrathstorm. For the first time, Lyra felt a glimmer of hope. With renewed determination, she refined her invention, working tirelessly to ensure its accuracy. When she was finally satisfied, she knew it was time to share her creation with the city. She contacted Mara, the leader of a small resistance group that sought to reclaim some semblance of order and safety in Prosperity. Mara was skeptical at first, her weathered face lined with distrust. The city had seen too many false promises and failed inventions. But when Lyra demonstrated the device's capabilities, predicting a minor storm that hit the next day, Mara's skepticism turned to cautious optimism. "We need to get this to as many people as possible," Mara said, her eyes flickering with hope. "If we can warn the city, we might be able to save lives." The resistance group sprang into action, distributing the devices and teaching the inhabitants how to use them. Word spread quickly, and soon, the entire city was abuzz with the news of Lyra's invention. The devices were simple yet effective, and for the first time in years, the people of Prosperity felt a sense of control over their fate. As the next Wrathstorm approached, the devices began to beep frantically, their warnings echoing through the narrow streets. The city, usually paralyzed by fear, moved with a coordinated urgency. People took shelter in the most reinforced buildings, securing their homes and gathering supplies. The storm hit with its usual ferocity, but this time, the casualties were significantly lower. Lyra's invention had given them the precious gift of time. In the aftermath of the storm, Lyra walked through the city, observing the changes her device had brought about. The gratitude in the eyes of the people she passed was overwhelming. For the first time since her parents' death, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment and purpose. But Lyra knew her work was far from over. The Wrathstorms were a symptom of a greater problem, the pollution and neglect that had turned Prosperity into a dystopian nightmare. With the trust she had gained, she joined forces with Mara and the resistance, setting their sights on a new goal, to address the root causes of the Wrathstorms. They began to organize cleanup efforts, targeting the most polluted areas of the city. They petitioned the factory owners, urging them to adopt cleaner technologies and reduce their emissions. It was a daunting task, met with resistance at every turn, but Lyra's invention had given the people a taste of what was possible. They were no longer willing to accept their fate passively. Slowly, change began to take root. It was not easy, and progress was often painfully slow, But the people of prosperity had discovered a renewed sense of hope and determination. They worked together, driven by the vision of a city that could once again live up to its name. Years passed, and prosperity began to transform. The skies, once perpetually grey, started to clear as the pollution levels dropped. The Wrathstorms, though still formidable, became less frequent and less severe. Lyra's barometers remained a symbol of the city's resilience and ingenuity, a reminder of the power of hope in the face of despair. Lyra stood on a hill overlooking the city, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the buildings below. She thought of her parents and the promise she had made to protect those she loved. In the distance, she could see the people of prosperity going about their lives, no longer haunted by the fear of the Wrathstorms. She smiled, knowing that while the journey had been arduous, it had been worth every moment. The city had found its way back to hope, guided by the determination of its people and the enduring spirit of resilience.